Hi, everyone. This is Robert Grillo, the director of Free From Harm. So I'm making this video because I wanted to respond in more depth to a question that an audience member had recently in an online symposium on animal law that I was a part of. I was one of the presenters, and I presented on the Slaughter-Free Cities initiative. And so one of the questions in the audience, which is all too common question, we've gotten for years, probably I would say all the way back to 2009. And it's still very pervasive, which is why I'm spending the time to properly respond to this. The question goes something like this. Well, not everyone is going to go vegan right away. And so until we reach 100% veganism, doesn't it make sense to advocate for humane animal products? So I have four thoughts on that. I have four ways to respond to that. First of all, no. The answer is no. The first reason is that if we were to apply this logic to any other social issue, people would not accept that logic at all. When we see an increase in harm to an oppressed group, how do we respond to that? Do we back off? Do we soften up our approach? Or do we look for ways to enable the exploitative practices and systems? Of course not. We step up our opposition against it. And of course, we don't realistically expect that anyone is going to accept, 100% of society is going to accept or completely denounce an injustice. Unfortunately, there will be a faction of people that will try to defend it, regardless of what the injustice is. But we certainly don't let that fact deter us from doing the work that we need to do to end the injustice. We step it up. The second thing about why we don't advocate for humane animal products is basically because who decides that what is considered humane, quote unquote humane? Is it the veterinarians that are paid for by the animal agriculture industry that get to decide what is considered humane treatment or practices? Is it animal industry spokespeople who will actually look us in the eye and tell us that grinding up baby chicks or sexually assaulting a female cow to impregnate her is humane? Of course not. We need to define what is humane for ourselves. And I advocate that we define humane treatment for farmed animals by the same ethical standards that we use for cats and dogs and other animals that we claim to value. In this context, even the most allegedly humane practices, farming practices, would have to be considered abusive or torturous or cruel or all of the above. Killing and exploiting and killing baby animals for profit would be all of those things. And then not to mention all the different practices that go along with that. The third reason why I would say we don't believe in the humane myth and we don't advocate for humane animal products is it would make no sense for us to advocate for the exploitation and killing of animals in an age when we have an abundance of plant-based alternatives. Most of us, many of us, not all of us maybe, but the point is, why would we not, when we have these resources, why? And even if we don't have those resources, even if there's not plant-based options for some, that would be all the more reason for us to get on the bandwagon and have our activism address the fact that these disparities exist and that certain communities and populations do not have access and should have access to plant-based foods, it would be all the more reason for us to advocate for plant-based alternatives, not quote unquote humane animal products. I mean, we're their advocates, right? How could we possibly justify continuing to advocate for violence against them, and as well as their killing? And what other cause, in what other social movement would this be remotely acceptable? This is an absurd notion to me. There is no humane violence or murder or abuse. It's just a deranged way of thinking that unfortunately many people have been seduced by because of how the industry has played this narrative in the public eye, and they've done it quite successfully. The fourth reason why we don't advocate humane products is, okay, let's just say, just for the sake of discussion, that we were to believe that there is some humane way to exploit and kill animals for profit, which of course we don't. Even if we did, it's mathematically impossible to raise animals on pasture and in settings in which many would consider humane. Animals raised in such environments require far more land, feed, and water. Only a small percentage of animals are raised like this today. And yet, we're already using 45% of the planet's land mass just to raise the animals that we eat in intensive farming. There would be no way in hell that we could expand on the population of animals to raise them on pasture. We would need something like 5 more planet Earths to raise all animals that we consume today on pasture. It's just foolishness that this idea that we should go that direction could be environmentally sustainable. Quite the contrary, it's an environmental disaster already. And if we were to go that pasture route, it would create an even greater, if possible, even greater environmental disaster than we already have to deal with today. So to wrap up, we can and must do far better than falling for the humane hoax. In the words of a former pig farmer and writer who I love to quote, his name is Bob Comis, he famously wrote, quote, "Livestock farmers, no matter what kind, from the largest, most cynical and inhumane factory farmers to the smallest, seemingly most ethical pasture-based farmers, traffic in death. It is death that is our aim, our purpose. Death is the end. Life is the means. Money, the reward." End quote. What Comis points to here is the inherent conflict of interest between treating animals with respect and using them as commodities. Even under the best circumstances, the incentive to treat animals humanely, as the industry would describe, is limited to the extent to which it is necessary to raise them to market weight, which is, of course, only a fraction of their natural lifespan. So please encourage people to think more critically about this issue of so-called humane animal products. It is not a solution for those 4 reasons and for so many more that we won't even cover here today. Thank you and see you next time.